Here we are today with Roger Davies, metal artist.
Hello.
Hi Roger, really fantastic to meet you. I just thought we'd begin just by explaining just kind of how you got here really. What's your artistic history? How did you come to be an artist?
What I wanted to do when I left school was be what they called a commercial artist, which I think is a graphics designer now, I'm not sure. Went to the careers teacher and spoke to them, and they just turned around and said, "You'll never make any money at that. What else are you good at?" And I said, "Metalwork." And they said, "You'll be an engineer." So there you go. I ended up going into engineering, and I did a full apprenticeship at Rolls-Royce, and I hated every second of it.
Oh,
It was just so too precise, and it didn't fit with me. And it took me some years to realise that I was just not suited for that. I stood in a hangar bay where we'd got engines set ready for test, and I watched the sunrise on an early morning shift, and I just thought, why am I here? I don't even like it. So I took voluntary redundancy, and I dropped out of society, and I went to live in Cornwall. I bought a wreck of a house, and I just went surfing for 2 years.
Surfing?
Yeah, I just loved the sea and surfing. It was great. And I decided that I was going to hire out surfboards and surf skis on the beach, so I bought some, and I started hiring them out, and it rained all summer. And after that, I went back to drawing and painting again, and I just thought, well, I'm going to try and sell some of my work. And that's when I started to really get serious about painting, and I did all the local views and that kind of thing. But it wasn't really what I was about as an artist, but I didn't know that at the time. I just had this feeling that, well, I'm just reproducing a picture, a scene or something like that. And went for an interview at the University of Derby, and I got accepted on the course, and it was a BA Honours course in what they called applied arts. So it wasn't painting, it was more of a contemporary feel for craft. So it was using new materials, new ideas, pushing boundaries, and I absolutely loved it. It was brilliant, it was like a challenge all the time. And I had fun being there. Then I got a big commission for myself, and I decided I was going to leave, and I thought this was it. This is the beginning of it all. It wasn't really. I was getting all this attention and money, and I thought I'm going to do this more, and I just kept on doing it, and it's kind of grown from there. But there's always that kind of argument in my own head is, am I doing the right thing, or am I just doing it for money?
One thing I've noticed about your art is there's often quite an element of the sea and the ocean in it.
Yeah.
Is that from Cornwall, or is that a separate interest?
I think it's a bit of both. Most people like the sea, and we always refer back to the sea in times when we've gone on holiday, and I do. And moving to Cornwall, I saw it a different way. It is very interesting, and I found a lot of nature very interesting as well. Something that always sticks in my mind a lot is this Fibonacci Spiral, and it reoccurs quite a lot in the themes of my work, and you'll find I've got shells, or I've got ammonites, or I've got things that are just basically a Fibonacci spiral. And I think there's something very, very close. I don't know, it's a feeling that I get. You think about it, and the Fibonacci spiral, you see it everywhere in nature, from the cones that we have outside on the trees, to the water that goes down the plug hole, to the whole galaxies that spin round. There's something really intrinsically locked in with nature and us as a connection. I get the feeling it's something to do with gravity. in total. I think it's something there that, you know, that's pulling us into that way, and it just comes back into my mind a lot.
I get that, because when we were walking past your stall, the first thing that drew us in was that Fibonacci Spiral that you've done, which is just so beautiful. Yeah. Tell me a little bit more about how you're inspired by it and how you came to make it.
Well, as I've said, I'm quite infatuated by that formula of a spiral, and this started off as just a backbone, really. There's a piece that runs all the way through it, right the way round, and it started off with that, and I didn't want it to be something that was solid, and then it sort of occurred to me to make it in little bits and cut pieces off, and it's semi-solid but it's also chaotic. So this one I started to call it Chaos and Solidity, and that's how it is. It's chaotic in all these bits going everywhere, and it's kind of crazy, and then you get to this section here and it's becoming solid, and then I was going to take it even further. I was going to make sections that were falling away, so it was breaking up and disappearing into nothing again. So it's kind of a representation of a galaxy, I guess, that's spinning around. It's born, and then after billions and billions of years, it disappears and becomes nothing. And it's just so interesting. But I like the fact that you can see through it. It's not a solid thing, and nothing is. Nothing in the universe is solid. None of us are. We're all just made up of atoms that are basically a nucleus and neutrons going around it, and everything in between it is space. There's nothing that is solid, and it's a crazy thing to think about, that is.
So tell me a little bit more about your thought process when you're creating art. Do you sort of plan it out beforehand, or do you just kind of, as you say, doodle and get inspired?
Depends what it is. If it's been a commission, if it's just a natural thing, I try to just do it. I'll go along and I'll try and get out my thoughts into whatever I'm making. More recently, I've identified there's a lot of processes that inform my work as well. So, such as welding, casting, mould making, those sort of things. They inform what you're going to make because they have limitations on how you can use those. Yeah. So it's trying to break further and further into those limitations. And then there's other aspects of my work which affect me, which is the green issues. I'm really well aware of how the planet is and how it's going to affect everybody. And I just had to pick up a can and realised it's made of aluminium. It's a material that should be soft, and it wasn't. It was brittle because it had been formed, pressed out, and it had retained its own memory. And I just wondered how I could use that in my work. And I started to cut cans up and heat them up and anneal them and then clean the paint off them. And I found that you can actually emboss on those really, really nicely. So I started to do that. And it's kind of got me in a way, because it's the feel, going back to the process, it's the feel of the metal being pushed as you use the styluses. In my case, I use a toothbrush as well, because I find that is better than a stylus because it's so soft at the end. It just runs so nicely over the surface. And a pencil, I use pencils as well. So we use the styluses and pencils and toothbrushes, and it's just that feeling of the metal going from a flat sheet and you push it like that, and it's so addictive. So I've started to do that, and I like that thing of it growing a picture out of this flat material. And you can feel the picture, you know, you don't just look at it, you can feel it, you can touch it, you can see that it's doing something more than just being flat. And that's one aspect of where I get my inspiration from. Other times somebody can come along and say, can you make this or do that? And then it's a different way of being informed, so you're making something for a particular reason. But the true art of it is when you do something and it just happens and you're happy with it. Like this Fibonacci Spiral, I started that and it grew and it grew and it grew. And I wish it could happen like that all the time, but it doesn't. It only happens when it's right. And that's how I am.
So in terms of commissions, it seems to me like so much of your really inspired work is really from the depth of you and your feeling. It must be quite more difficult to do that if it's a commission where someone said, I want you to do this, but somehow you've got to draw that same sense and feeling out of it for something that was perhaps somebody else's idea. Is that ever a conflict?
Yeah, it is, because I'll have an idea of what I think something should be, and they'll have their idea. And sometimes what somebody wants isn't always what you can put in a public place, if it is a piece of public artwork, or it may be that it's not going to fit into where they want it in the garden. And in that case, you've got to go along and look at where this is going to be seated, where it's going to appear, and you've got to work out in your mind what would really work as an object there, and how it relates to what they want. So it does take a lot of sitting down and thinking, and then sketching. And that's how I work when it's with a customer. If they commission me for a piece of work, then I usually say, look, I'll do some sketching first. Let's have a look where you're going to put it, and I'll do it to fit that area, rather than you come along and say, oh, I want a stag for there, and it doesn't fit at all. It's kind of like somebody saying, going and buying an ornament that is not going to work in a way. So it's better to sit down. It's the best way of actually working for the customer and for yourself, is to sit down and draw where it's going to go and what it is, rather than just say, yeah, we'll have that, because that doesn't work.
It's a real collaboration in the end.
It is. It's got to be a collaboration.
I think people might be interested in where they can see your work. Are you mostly exhibiting in the Midlands?
Yes, I mean, it's typical of typical of artists. They're not very good at explaining where they are, or making themselves more available and public to people. I am pretty rubbish at that, but I've slowly over the years been pushing my work at different venues, mainly in the Midlands. We have gone further afield, but I found that there was too much.
Literally, what I'm going to do now is have a little wander around with my camera around the workshop, and maybe get some more ideas from you about what the different pieces mean. But for now, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So Roger, what's this part of your studio?
Right, this part of the studio is the industrial bit. This is where I keep all my equipment, and you'll see things like formers like this, which I use just to gauge an idea for a small stag, or such as the dog on here, which is a commission that I'm doing, but I'm using it, I've carved that to use it as a way of seeing the dog and how to make it in metal. So eventually these bits, that's going to be the nose when I get round to finishing those bits off.
Thanks very much, Roger. It's been absolutely fascinating talking to you. In fact, I could have spent hours here listening to you, to be honest. It's really interesting.
Not many people say that, do they?
Well, it's the absolute truth. It's absolute truth.